Bella had barely set her coffee on my parents' dining table when my mother folded her hands, looked directly at my fiancé, and said, "There's something Bella never told you." The room went silent. My father didn't hesitate. "She has a child," he said flatly, "a daughter she gave up years ago." I felt every pair of eyes land on me. My fiancé, Nathan, didn't speak. My mother leaned forward, as if she were carrying a burden no parent should ever have to carry. "We protected her secret because she's our daughter," she said, "but we can't let you marry her without knowing who she really is." Dad nodded once. "Don't let her fool you too." I didn't defend myself. I didn't interrupt. I simply sat there. To anyone watching, my silence looked exactly like guilt. Mom took a slow breath, clearly believing she'd won. "You see," she whispered, "she can't even deny it." Nathan finally stood. Without raising his voice, he reached into his pocket, unlocked his phone, and opened a photograph. He turned the screen toward my parents. "Is this the child you're talking about?" For the first time since we'd arrived, neither of my parents spoke. The color drained from my mother's face. Dad stared at the picture as though he'd seen a ghost. Nathan slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I think," he said calmly, "we'll finish this conversation at the rehearsal dinner." Then he walked toward the door. Neither of my parents tried to stop him. And I realized they had absolutely no idea what was coming. Only 12 days remained before our wedding. Those 12 days were supposed to be filled with seating charts, final dress fittings, and arguments over whether we really needed another dessert option. Instead, they began with my parents trying to convince the man I loved that I'd secretly abandoned a child. The accusation should have shocked me. Instead, it felt painfully familiar. Growing up, my parents had always controlled the story before anyone could hear mine. If I forgot to call after work, I was ungrateful. If I disagreed with them, I was disrespectful. If I stayed quiet, they decided what my silence meant. Somewhere along the way, I'd learned that defending myself only gave them a larger audience. So when Mom accused me that afternoon, every instinct told me to stay still. Nathan knew that. He squeezed my hand as we walked outside, but didn't ask a single question. He already knew the truth. He'd known it years before he ever proposed. Behind us, the front door opened. Mom called after us. "Nathan, think about what you're doing." Dad added, "If you marry her without knowing everything, that's on you." Nathan stopped long enough to glance back over his shoulder. "I know everything that matters." Then he opened my car door. The drive home was almost completely silent. Finally, I looked at him. "They're not going to stop." "I know." "They're going to call everyone." "I know." I swallowed hard. "They'll ruin the wedding." Nathan kept his eyes on the road. "Only if we let them write the ending." I wanted to believe him. But I'd lived with Diane and Harold Carter long enough to know they never started a lie they weren't prepared to defend. And for the first time in my life, I wondered whether staying silent was about to cost far more than it ever had before. The next morning, my phone started vibrating before I'd even finished pouring my coffee. "Aunt Linda." I answered. "Sweetheart," she began carefully, "is there something you need to tell us before the wedding?" I closed my eyes. "It already reached you." She hesitated. "Your mother sounded heartbroken." Of course she did. Mom had always known exactly how to sound like the wounded parent forced into an impossible situation. "I can't discuss it right now," I said quietly. "I just don't want anyone getting hurt." Neither did I. We hung up. Within minutes, another message appeared. "Cousin Rachel, can we talk?" Then another. "Uncle Steve, call me when you can." Then another. By lunchtime, nearly a dozen relatives had reached out. Not one of them asked what had actually happened. They all asked versions of the same question. "Is it true?" Mom wasn't telling outrageous lies. That was what made her so dangerous. She wasn't saying I'd abandoned a child yesterday. She wasn't inventing fake hospital records. Instead, she repeated carefully crafted sentences. A mother doesn't abandon a child unless she's hiding something. Nathan deserves honesty before he gets married. We've protected Bella long enough. She let everyone else reach the conclusion she wanted. It was manipulation disguised as concern. By afternoon, people had begun filling in the blanks themselves. When I arrived home from work, Nathan was sitting at the kitchen island reviewing vendor emails. He looked up the moment I walked inside. How bad? I dropped my phone onto the counter. It spread. He glanced at the screen. 34 unread messages. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. He didn't need to ask who they'd come from. I leaned against the counter. I should answer them. No. They think I'm guilty. I know. They're hearing one version. I know. I looked at him in disbelief. So why are we doing nothing? Nathan stood and walked over. We're not doing nothing. It feels like it. No, he said gently. We're refusing to let your parents choose the battlefield. He rested both hands on my shoulders. Do you remember what we promised each other after we got engaged? I nodded without speaking. If someone attacks us, we don't spend our marriage chasing rumors, I finished quietly. We face facts. I laughed bitterly. Facts aren't spreading. I know. Lies are. He smiled sadly. They spread faster. Then why stay quiet? Because every person they're convincing right now is expecting one thing. What? That we'll panic. I stared at him. If we spend the next 12 days calling relatives, defending ourselves one conversation at a time, we're playing their game. He was right. I hated that he was right. That evening, my Aunt Karen finally called. Unlike everyone else, she didn't dance around the subject. Bella. Hi, Aunt Karen. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Did you ever give birth? No. She exhaled slowly. That's all I wanted to know. You believe me. I've watched your parents rewrite stories for 30 years. A lump formed in my throat. I just wish more people had. Karen lowered her voice. They're calling everyone. I figured. They're making it sound like they're sacrificing their relationship with you just to protect Nathan. Exactly the image my parents wanted. The grieving mother. The disappointed father. The daughter, too, ashamed to tell the truth. Around 7 that evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't another relative. It was Emma. Emma, can I ask you something? I replied immediately. Me, of course. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Returned. Finally, her message arrived. Emma, someone from your family messaged me today. My stomach tightened. Another message came. Emma, they asked if you're really my mother. I sat frozen. Nathan looked up from the couch. What happened? I handed him the phone. He read the messages without saying a word. My chest tightened. They involved her. They did. She's 15. I know. She already lost her mom. I know. And now they're dragging her into this because they want to destroy me. Nathan set the phone down. They're not thinking about Emma. They never were. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Emma. I answered immediately. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the uncertainty underneath. I'm okay. You shouldn't have to deal with this. I've had worse. That hurt more than she probably realized. I'm so sorry. You didn't do anything. No, but because of me. Because of them, she corrected softly. I closed my eyes. She was right. Even now, I was accepting responsibility for damage I hadn't caused. I was thinking, Emma said after a moment. My heart sank. I don't like that sentence. She laughed quietly. I know. What are you thinking? I think hiding isn't helping anymore. I glanced toward Nathan. He was already watching me. They're using me even though I'm not there. Emma, if everyone thinks I'm some secret. She paused. Maybe I shouldn't stay a secret. The room fell completely silent. Then she said the one sentence that changed everything. I think I should come to the rehearsal dinner. Nathan met my eyes from across the room. Neither of us answered immediately. Because we both understood. If Emma walked into that room, there would be no turning back. The rehearsal dinner arrived faster than I wanted. By 6 o'clock, the private ballroom was already filling with relatives, close friends, and members of Nathan's family. Soft music played through the speakers. Servers carried trays of sparkling water and appetizers between small groups of guests. From a distance, it looked exactly like every rehearsal dinner I'd ever attended. Up close, it felt nothing like one. Every conversation seemed to stop the moment Nathan and I stepped through the doors. Then it started again, in whispers. I caught pieces of sentences as we walked by. That's her. I heard her parents finally told him. Poor Nathan. Is the girl coming? I kept my shoulders straight and continued walking. Nathan quietly took my hand. I'm right here. I know. At the front of the room sat the head table. One chair remained empty. A small place card rested in front of it. Emma Brooks. My mother noticed it immediately. She exchanged a glance with Dad before smiling at a nearby cousin. You see, she whispered loudly enough for several people to hear. She had to invite the girl. Someone asked quietly, so it's true. Mom sighed dramatically. I wish it weren't. I didn't respond. Nathan simply pulled out my chair and helped me sit. The whispers only grew louder. Dinner was served, but almost nobody seemed interested in eating. Every few minutes, I caught someone looking toward the ballroom entrance. Waiting. Wondering. Imagining. My father looked more confident with every passing minute. He believed the empty chair proved his story. If Emma never appeared, people would assume Bella was hiding her. If she did appear, they'd assume she'd been exposed. Either outcome worked in his favor. Or so he thought. As the salads were cleared away, Harold slowly stood and picked up his champagne glass. He smiled politely. If I could have everyone's attention. The room quieted. Nathan glanced toward me. You okay? I nodded once. Dad cleared his throat. Traditionally, rehearsal dinners are about celebrating two families becoming one. He looked toward Nathan's parents. Linda, Michael, you've raised a remarkable son. Nathan's mother smiled politely. Thank you. But, Dad continued, a marriage built on secrets rarely survives. The room became perfectly still. He turned toward me. Bella. I met his eyes. I've given you every opportunity to tell everyone the truth. He waited. I said nothing. He slowly nodded, as though my silence proved everything. So I'll ask one simple question. He faced the room. Why didn't you tell your fiancé that you already had a daughter? Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Someone dropped a fork. A chair scraped across the floor. Nathan's younger brother stared at me in disbelief. One of my cousins covered her mouth. The accusation had finally been made publicly. Exactly as my parents had planned. Mom dabbed at the corner of one eye with a napkin. We prayed she'd find the courage. Dad continued. No father wants to expose his own daughter. His voice cracked just enough to sound convincing. But Nathan deserves honesty before he says his vows. Several relatives slowly nodded. Others looked down at their plates. Nathan still hadn't moved. He hadn't argued. He hadn't defended me. For one dangerous moment, even I wondered what everyone else was seeing. Then he quietly stood. He buttoned his jacket. Without asking permission, he walked toward the large projector screen the venue had prepared for our wedding slideshow. A few guests exchanged confused looks. Nathan connected his phone. The projector flickered. Then an image filled the screen. The photograph showed me smiling beside a teenage girl. My arm rested around her shoulders. She leaned against me with the easy comfort of someone who trusted me completely. Behind us stood the stone steps of a courthouse. Sunlight reflected off the windows. People throughout the ballroom immediately began whispering again. There. Mom pointed triumphantly toward the screen. I told you. Dad nodded. That's exactly the girl. Several guests looked at me. Others looked back at the photograph. The room buzzed with uncertainty. Nathan picked up the presentation remote. Look closer. He enlarged the lower corner of the image. The courthouse seal came into focus. Then part of the official paperwork I was holding became readable. Across the top, just beneath the seal, several words appeared. Guardianship order. The whispers stopped. Confused expressions replaced certain ones. A cousin frowned. Guardianship. An uncle leaned forward. What does that mean? My mother froze. Dad's confident smile disappeared for the first time that evening. Nathan didn't explain. He simply stepped away from the screen. Before anyone could ask another question, the ballroom doors slowly opened. Every head turned. A teenage girl stood quietly in the doorway, holding a small folder against her chest. She took one steady breath. Then she walked inside. The room remained completely silent as Emma walked toward the center of the ballroom. She wore a simple navy dress with a light gray cardigan over her shoulders. The folder she held was pressed tightly against her chest with both hands. She looked 15. Not like a secret. Not like a scandal. Just a nervous teenager walking into a room full of adults who had been talking about her without ever asking her a single question. Every eye followed her. My mother straightened in her chair. Dad folded his arms. Several relatives exchanged uncertain glances. One whispered, "That's her." Another replied, "She really does look comfortable around Bella." Emma stopped beside Nathan. He smiled reassuringly. "You don't have to do this." She nodded once. "I know." Then she turned toward me. "Are you okay?" I tried to smile. "I should be asking you that." She managed a small smile back. "I'll be okay." My father broke the silence. "So," he gestured toward Emma. "Would someone like to explain this?" Emma looked directly at him. "I would." His confident expression faltered. He clearly hadn't expected the teenager herself to speak. Nathan stepped back, giving her the floor. Emma took another slow breath. "My name is Emma Brooks." Her voice shook for only a second before becoming steady. "I'm not here because someone forced me." She glanced toward me. "I'm here because I asked to come." Several guests looked surprised. Mom frowned. Emma continued. "I've heard people saying Bella hid me." She paused. "That's not true." No one interrupted. I was the one who wanted privacy. One of my cousins raised a cautious hand. "Can I ask you something?" Emma nodded. "Were you living with Bella?" "Yes." "So?" He hesitated. "Is she your mother?" Emma smiled gently. "No." The answer echoed through the room. Several guests looked immediately toward my parents. Mom quickly recovered. "She's probably confused." Emma looked directly at her. I'm not. The firmness in her voice surprised everyone, including me. Emma shifted the folder into one arm. When I was younger, she swallowed. The worst year of my life happened. No one moved. My mom became very sick. I lowered my eyes. I remembered every hospital visit, every late-night phone call, every promise made between tears. Emma continued carefully. Before she died, her voice cracked slightly. She made Bella promise something. She looked at me for a brief moment. Bella kept that promise. Nothing more. She didn't explain what the promise was. She didn't reveal who her mother had been. She only planted another piece of the puzzle. My Aunt Linda quietly asked, "What promise?" Emma shook her head. "That's not my story to tell." The room remained silent. Then she added softly, "But I can tell you this." She turned back toward everyone. Bella never tried to replace anyone. My throat tightened. She never told me I had to call her mom. A few relatives exchanged uneasy glances. She never erased my mother's memory. Emma's eyes glistened. She made sure I remembered her. Nathan looked toward me. I could see the emotion in his face, but he stayed silent. This wasn't his moment. It wasn't mine either. It belonged to Emma. My mother finally stood. "This doesn't change anything." Several people turned toward her. "You've still been living with Bella." Emma nodded. "Yes. So why would she hide that?" Emma answered without hesitation. "She didn't." Mom blinked. "I asked her not to tell people." The room shifted again. Someone whispered, "Wait." Another added, "So Bella wasn't hiding her." Emma continued, "I didn't want everyone at school knowing what happened to my family." She looked down briefly. "I wanted one normal thing in my life." No one spoke. Even the servers had stopped moving. My father cleared his throat. "That's still not the whole story." Emma slowly lifted the folder she had carried into the room. "No." He smiled, believing she had just admitted he was right. "It isn't." She carefully opened the folder. Inside were several neatly organized documents. On top rested an old envelope. Its edges had yellowed with time. She held it carefully, almost reverently. "There are copies of the court papers." Several guests leaned forward. "And..." She gently touched the envelope. "There's one letter." I recognized it instantly. My breathing caught. The handwriting. The faded blue ink. The careful loops in every letter. I hadn't seen that envelope in years. Emma looked at me. "I never opened it without you." I nodded slowly. "I know." She took a shaky breath. "I think everyone deserves to know why Bella became my guardian." Then she looked directly into my eyes. "Should I read Mom's letter?" The entire ballroom waited for my answer. For a moment, the entire ballroom disappeared. The whispers, the accusations, the stares. All I could see was the envelope in Emma's hands. The same cream-colored envelope her mother had sealed years ago. The same one she had asked me to keep until Emma was old enough to decide whether its contents should ever be shared. I slowly stood. Every eye followed me. I walked to Emma and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at me. Her eyes silently asked the question again. I nodded. "Yes." She took a steadying breath. Then she carefully unfolded the letter. "My dearest Emma," she began. The room became perfectly still. "If you're reading this, then my greatest fear has already come true. I'm no longer there to embarrass you with terrible jokes or remind you to finish your vegetables." A few people smiled through tears. Emma continued reading. "I've spent months wondering who could love you the way I do when I'm gone." She paused briefly before continuing. The answer has always been Bella. I lowered my eyes. I remembered sitting beside a hospital bed, insisting there had to be another treatment. Another specialist. Another chance. There hadn't been. Emma continued. I am not asking Bella to replace me. Her voice grew stronger. No one ever could. Several guests quietly wiped away tears. I am asking her to protect you. To remind you who your mother was. To celebrate every birthday I will miss. To cheer for every accomplishment. And to let you grow into the incredible young woman I already know you'll become. Emma's hands trembled slightly. If the court allows it, I want Bella to become your legal guardian, not because she owes me anything, but because I trust her with the most precious part of my life. The room remained completely silent. I know she will never use your pain for attention. I know she will never let you feel abandoned. And I know she will always tell you how fiercely I loved you. Emma lowered the letter for a moment. She looked at me. I never doubted her. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. Nathan quietly stepped beside us. He faced the room. That's the first time I've heard the entire letter. He looked toward Emma. Thank you for sharing it. Then he turned to our guests. Bella told me about Emma within the first few months we were dating. A ripple of surprise spread across the ballroom. I met Emma years before I ever bought an engagement ring. Emma smiled. Nathan laughed softly. Actually, he looked at her. You helped me choose it. Emma nodded. I liked the first one. You absolutely hated the second. A few guests laughed through their tears. And you told me Bella would never pretend to like something just because it was expensive. Even I laughed. I remember that. Nathan smiled. Good thing I listened. The tension in the room shifted completely. For the first time all evening, people weren't looking at me with suspicion. They were looking at the three of us as a family built on trust rather than blood. Nathan walked to the projector screen. The picture my future in-laws saw wasn't evidence of a secret. He clicked the remote once. The image filled the screen again. It was taken outside the courthouse after Bella officially became Emma's legal guardian. He zoomed in. The courthouse seal became clear. Beneath it, the words were now fully visible. Asterisk order, appointing legal guardian. No one questioned it. The documents in Emma's folder matched the photograph perfectly. Court dates, signatures, official seals. Everything aligned. There was no hidden child. There had never been a hidden pregnancy. Only a young woman who had kept a promise to her dying friend. Slowly, every face in the room turned toward my parents. For the first time all evening, they had nowhere to hide. My father stood abruptly. We misunderstood what we found. No one responded. Mom forced a weak smile. We were only trying to protect Nathan. My Aunt Karen stood. No. Everyone looked at her. You weren't protecting anyone. She faced my parents. You chose the most damaging story you could imagine because you knew people would believe it. Mom shook her head. That's not true. Karen didn't back down. I've watched you rewrite Bella's life for years. She looked around the room. How many of us accepted your version without ever asking hers? Several relatives lowered their eyes. One by one, they realized they had done exactly that. My cousin Rachel stood first. She walked over to me. I'm sorry. I hugged her. I should have called you before believing anything. You weren't the only one. My Uncle Steve followed. Then Aunt Linda. Then more relatives. Each apology hurt because it reminded me how quickly doubt had replaced trust. But each apology also healed something my parents had spent years breaking. One conversation at a time. Dad tried one last time. I am still her father. Nathan answered calmly. And that gave you every opportunity to ask Bella the truth. He looked directly at him. You chose a lie instead. The ballroom coordinator quietly approached our table. She had clearly been listening from a respectful distance. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. She spoke gently but firmly. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Mom stared at her. What? This evening is for the couple. She glanced around the room. You're no longer contributing to that. Dad looked around, expecting someone to defend him. No one did. After several long seconds, he placed his napkin on the table. Without another word, he and my mother walked toward the ballroom doors. No one stopped them. The doors closed softly behind them. It was the quietest exit they had ever made. The next 12 days passed peacefully. Without the constant rumors, our families finally got to know one another the way they should have from the beginning. The wedding itself was everything we'd hoped for. Nathan waited for me at the end of the aisle with the same calm smile he'd worn in my parents' living room. The difference was that this time, there were no accusations hanging over us. Only people who had chosen truth. Emma stood beside me throughout the ceremony. Not as my hidden daughter. Not as anyone's scandal. She stood there as the young woman whose mother had trusted me with the greatest responsibility of my life. When the ceremony ended, she hugged both of us before the photographs began. One picture became my favorite. The three of us stood together beneath the afternoon sun. Nathan on one side, Emma on the other. No courthouse. No legal documents. No lies. Just a family built on promises kept. As for my parents, they lost far more than an invitation to a wedding. Relatives stopped accepting their stories without question. The influence they had spent decades protecting disappeared the moment everyone realized how easily they had weaponized the truth. Months later, I finally understood something I should have learned years earlier. Silence can prevent an argument, but it cannot defeat a lie determined to grow. Only the truth, shared at the right moment, can do that. I didn't walk away from my parents because I hated them. I walked away because they no longer had the power to define who I was. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't rewrite my story.